Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Today what we're going to be looking at is using the sequencer in a bit more of an advanced state. Um, Not super advanced, but a bit more in depth than my previous video. And I'm just going to cover a few more things. The sequencer is great for things like automation, whether that's going to be a cinematic, whether that's going to be opening a door, moving a platform, and just doing sort of tasks that can be triggered or repeated tasks. I don't know if you want to have like I don't know, changing something over time is usually something that the sequence is good for, and changing the transforms on things and other bits and pieces like that. One other thing is we're in Unreal Engine 5 today. Now, this isn't going to make a big difference if you're in Unreal 4. Basically, the only things that are different is a visual aspect for what we're doing. Obviously, the menus and everything look just a little bit different, but you won't have any problem following this in Unreal 4, so don't let that bother you. And if there is something slightly different, I will also just mention where that would be in Unreal 4. However, I don't think what we're covering today we're going to need to do that. But without any further ado, let's just jump straight into it. Oh yeah, and I'm wearing my headset today because I think that's probably the best mic that I've got. The table mic that I bought was awful as per the last two videos. So let me know in the comments if this is better. So yeah, so I've opened up a basic third-person scene, and to start using sequencer, what I'm going to suggest is that we just make a basic moving platform to start with. Just start with the basics, and I'm just going to cover a few more bits and pieces which I don't think I covered in the last one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this cube to be in line with this, or not in line with, but not quite close to it. I'm going to move that there, leave a bit of a gap. So basically now I've got a platform to run up and stand on. Just in case you didn't know, the way that I'm moving around the scene is if you hold the right mouse button, you can obviously pan the mouse around. You can also use W, A, S and D keys on the keyboard to move around, and you can use Q and E to move up and down, and that's how I'm navigating around. If it is a bit too fast or a bit too slow, you can scroll with the mouse wheel to either slow down or speed up. And if you want to do even more adjusting of the speed, there is a little camera up in the top here which you can change that to whatever speed that you like. Yep, just a little quick tip there. So I'm just going to pop that back. Right, so now what we've got is if we just press play, we can run up here and we've got this little platform, and it'd be great if we could like get it to just navigate over here and maybe navigate back, whichever way. So let's just set that up, and we can easily do that with the sequencer. I'll tell you what we'll do as well. Let's move that. So well above that. Move that down. Okay. So let's say we're going to get the platform to move here, so then we can try and jump up and grab that. That's like a little goal. Yeah, let's say that. So what we need to do is we need to create a sequencer. So in your content browser, which in UE5 is this little drawer, you can right click and go to the animation menu and add a level sequence. Alternatively, what you can also do is at the top left hand corner you'll see a cinematics button. I know in 4.26 it's up here as well, so you shouldn't have any problem following along. Just hit cinematics and add a level sequence. This menu is a little different. It just, instead of it being in the app drawer and you can pick where you want it, this window pops up to ask you where to put it. I'm just going to put it just straight in the content browser. I'm not going to put it in any folder for this video, but you store it where appropriate. I'm just going to call this one move platform because that's what this sequence is going to do. Now you can just so you know, obviously I'm going to set up like a separate sequence for each sort of task or each thing that I want to do. I don't know the right or wrong way. Well, other than organisation, I don't know if it's a right or a wrong way of doing it. You can put all of your sequences or all of your tasks in one sequence. I think it's better if you're going to be like moving objects, you call that a sequence, and then have several objects moving in one track, because then you can use the master sequence to sort of tag them all together. But I'm just going to create separate ones and play them a little bit, maybe inefficiently. But anyway, nonetheless, let's crack on. So we've just created the move platform sequence, which should have brought up the sequencer for you. If it didn't, you can go to Window at the top and go to Cinematics and click on the sequencer, and that should bring up this menu. Other than the icons looking slightly different in Unreal 4, this shouldn't be any different whatsoever. So for us to use the sequencer, we need to tell it what I'd like to add. Now you can add a track, and you can see you've been given all of these options. So these are things that you can play with in your own time. But I want to add an actor, or I want to, I need to add an actor to the sequencer, so then I can change its properties on a time frame. So what you can do is you can select the object in your scene just to make it a bit easier. So you can see that this is cube mesh, and then if you come back to add track and go to actor to sequence, because we've selected it, it actually gives you this handy shortcut up at the top for the selected mesh, and that's the one that we want. If you don't have the option to select it, or for whatever reason you just want to quickly add it, well, not quickly, but you can search for everything that's within your scene. This is basically just a copy of every actor that's in your world outliner. So if you know that it's called cube mesh, you could scroll down and find it and select it, and that wouldn't be any different. It's just handy to know that little shortcut there. So now we've got the cube mesh in our timeline, in our sequencer. Now, just a note, this is 30 frames per second, and by default this sequencer, this timeline, is in frames. So if we go to 30 frames, obviously we're at 30 FPS, that'd be a second's worth of time. If you do want to change that, you can click on this 30 FPS here, change it to whatever you prefer, or if you want to, you can show time as, and instead of frames you can have seconds. So you can see here now we're at 1 second, 2 seconds, blah blah blah, and then that'll just help you out if that's the way you want to see things. I have no issue using frames, so it's just a little simple division. 30 frames, 60 frames divided by 30 frames is how many seconds you are. By default this is set to 150, which is 5 seconds, which is absolutely fine for us. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add what's called a keyframe to my sequencer. Now a keyframe is basically just where we're saying, right, something's changing here. This is the point that I want to record some specific properties, because in the future I'm going to give you another set of keyframes and I want you to change between the two. So obviously I've put this this cube in the position I really want it to start from. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go click and add keyframe, and you can see that's been represented with a red dot. Now if you want to go in and be a little bit more specific, you can break these down and see the exact units or coordinates of them, and you can play around with these as you will. But I'm just going to keyframe the entire transform, so it takes a note of everything. I'm not changing rotation and scale, but if you need to, you can do that. So now, when I first play this sequence, at the very start, this is where it's going to be in the world. Now, by the time I get, by the time I get to the end of the sequence, I want it to be over here. I want it to be underneath this, so then I have an opportunity to jump up and grab it. Now, let's just get it to go over there at first, and then we'll move on to something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, right, well, by frame 150, after 5 seconds, I want it to be, which should be somewhat underneath that. Yep, that'll do. I might have made that question mark a little bit high, but anyway. So now I want it to be here. So what we need to do now is click on Add Keyframe, and then that now has added another keyframe. So if we actually scroll this back across, you'll notice it actually moves, and that's the actual transition that's going to happen when we play this sequence. It's actually going to make that change. Now, one problem we've got is by default, well, not by default, but for the cube's natural position is here. So what will happen? Actually, I'll show you what will happen. That might be more useful. But first, we need to tell it how to play it. So if we just press play now, nothing will happen because we're not telling Unreal to ever play that sequence. It has no way of knowing that we want it to play. So what I like to do is, because most of the sequences are kept within a level, I like to add things to the level blueprint. So up at the top, next to cinematics, and I think this is the same in Unreal 4, if you up at the top on the bar, the icon looks a little bit different, but it's the same menu. It should say blueprints. If you click on that, there should be open level blueprint. Now, when this opens, we can trigger it in a couple of different ways, which I'll touch on in a few minutes. But for now, what we're going to do is just an event begin player. Grab one of those, and then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick delay. Now, the only reason I'm adding this in is just so that when we press play, it's not immediately playing the sequence, just so then we can actually see it kicking in. I'm just going to add a 5-second delay, just so then it gives us enough time to get prepared and ready to watch. Once that delay is finished, what we're going to do is we're going to create a sequence player. So what this is going to take in is it's going to take in the level sequence that it wants to play. So you could actually set up a system to switch these sequences in and out. You could just create another level sequence player and just play them all on top of each other. But for now, we're just going to select the move platform level sequence. So from here, that only creates a player. That doesn't actually play the sequence. Because if we press play now and wait 5 seconds, you should see nothing. Absolutely nothing happens, because all that's happening is the sequence player's been created, and that's about it. So if we take the returning value, which is going to be the player with that sequence in it, we can say play. So let's compile that. We've got a green tick, so we're good to go. So now we're saying after 5 seconds, create a player and then play it. So now we should actually see something happen. Let's stay here. So 5 seconds, there we go. We can see our platforms moving over. Whoa. Well, then he just jumps back. So this is one of the things that I started to mention a minute ago. Essentially what happens is this scale goes across, and then when it's finished, it just goes back to the beginning. So we've seen this play from 0 to 150 frames, and then it's finished, so it just resets back to 0. So the cube actually just jumps back to its original position. Now, you might not want this. I mean, you might, in most cases, you don't want this to happen, but you might want this to happen for whatever reason. To prevent that from happening, what you can do is, if you right-click on the actual sort of the coloured timeline where you've made your changes with your keyframes, if you right-click on this and go to the very top in properties, there's a when finished sort of property, and this is set to project default, which I think is restore state. So we want to keep the state. So that's basically saying once you've finished playing the sequence, whatever changes you made during the sequence, keep those changes. So now if we press play and we 5 seconds. Here we go. So now the sequence is played, and then it finishes, and then we've kept the state. So now you can see that this cube is at the end, and it hasn't just suddenly snapped back to its original position. Great. So now we're getting somewhere. Now that's great and all, but what if we want to we don't want to wait 5 seconds and have to time everything. What if we want to set up some sort of trigger to say when the player gets to the block, then animate it, then allow the platform to move across the map. So for us to do that, we need to set up a trigger. Now this isn't necessarily specific to the sequencer, but it involves it. So what we need to do, we need to add a trigger volume. So in Unreal 5, you want to go to the Create menu, and conveniently enough, under Basics, you've got Box Trigger. Now, I'm pretty certain that in Unreal 4, you have a similar menu. On the left-hand side, you've got the Create menu. You've got like your BSPs, your lighting, your volumes, and I'm pretty certain there's a category called Basic from memory. And under that, there should be a trigger volume or a box trigger, one of the two. If not, just type in trigger, because there's a little search bar at the top, and you should find it. If not, it's also under volumes, I believe. And you're after a trigger box, trigger volume, you know, any sort of collider that allows you to do a trigger. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to position this on top of the cube, so when we stand on the platform, you know, we know our character's ready to go because we're stood on top of the platform. You can position this wherever you want. You might want it to set off when they get just before it, so the player's aware of it, or you know, you might just want it to be playing all the time from the very beginning. You might not want a trigger, but if you do, this is the way to do it. So here's our trigger volume. So down underneath the details, I'm just going to change the box extent. It's just the size. I'm just going to change the height to 10. I'm just going to raise it slightly above, just so it doesn't catch the box itself. And then I'm just going to increase the width and length to 60, just so it covers a bit more area on top of the cube. And I'm just going to pull this back down, so then you can see the rest of the outline. Okay, so now we've got our trigger volume. So now we need to tie the sequencer and the trigger volume together, so then the trigger volume actually triggers the sequence. So what we're going to do is go back into the level blueprint. If you closed it, don't forget that's under blueprints and open level blueprint, and that should take you back to this that we created earlier. Now instead of event begin player, we want to say, well, when we trigger that box, then do this. So we're not going to need a delay either, because it's triggered from when we hit it. You can have a mild delay in between before it if you want, but I'm not going to choose to do that. So if you go back to your scene and make sure you've got your trigger box selected, you can either select that in the world outliner, or you can click on it in the world, as long as you've got trigger box selected. If we go back into this scene, into this level blueprint, and we right click, the context menu should give us the option to add event for trigger box 0, which we had selected, and then under that we've got collision, and then add an on actor begin overlap. So that's just saying that when an actor overlaps this box, do this. So in case you've got other actors in your scene, you can set up a cast to third person, so that'll only activate when your character hits it, and then that'll play the rest of the thing for you. You can be a bit more open and take any character if you, let's say you're doing a multiplayer game. So the way I like to do that is to get the class of the actor that's worked over it. And then from the overlap, I like to cast to character, which is basically any character class. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Cast to character class. So that's basically any actor that has the class of character behind it should activate it. Let's say you've got projectiles, you know, anything like that, anything else that moves around in the scene, that should, apart from AI and other characters, it should prevent them from setting it off. Yep, that might be useful to you, it might not be. So now, essentially, when we go and stand on that trigger box, we should then move across the scene. Yep, and that's happened, so we've stood on the trigger box, we've moved over. Great, and then we can jump up, grab that, and we win the game. Brilliant. But that's a bit too easy. If it just moves over there and then stays there, and I can just jump, and you know, there's no challenge. What if we want it to like move backwards and forwards, so we've got to time it right? Let's say the floor's lava, and you know you've got to time it right. How could we do that? So there is a node where this is play. There is a looping node, but the problem is, what would happen if we looped this at the moment? What would happen is it'd go like that, and then it'd just jump back to the beginning and start again, and then jump back to the beginning and then start again. We don't want that. We need a sort of a smooth way to go back and forward. So what you can do, because obviously this our ending is at 150. We essentially need to, if you're happy with how long it takes to get over there, we need to extend it. If you want it to work a bit quicker, you could sort of put this keyframe in the middle, and then you'll see what's going to happen in just a sec. But I'm going to extend it. So in these numbers down at the bottom, essentially that's just limiting to how much of the timeline you can see. I'm just going to change that to 320, and I'm going to change the other one to 320. So now I have a visibility of at least 300. And I'm just going to move this slider. I can move this one actually. I'm going to move it to 300, and then I'm going to drag this red one, which is the end of my sequence, and I'm just going to snap it to 300 like that. Great. So what we can see, now we've got that ending, is we're going to play, we're going to get to there, and then nothing's going to happen. So essentially what we need this position to be at the end. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to right click on these keyframes. I'm going to copy them. I'm going to paste just somewhere near the end, and I'm going to paste the transform. And you can see now it's pasted where the cursor is. So if you click on it and move it around, you'll actually see the numbers 300, which is great because now, look at that. If we play from the beginning, it's going to go to the spot and then transition back to the original. And then if it plays from the beginning again, it's going to look very smooth. This is brilliant now because what's going to happen is, if we just press play, let's just. Oops! Don't leave your sequence midway through, 'cause it messes up. Essentially, when we run on top of this, now what's going to happen? It's going to come over here. We're going to stop, and then we're going to move back. That was glitchy a little bit then. Now, I genuinely think that was a little bit glitchy. Oh, I see why. So the actual trigger volume doesn't move with it. So when we get back here, we're actually activating that trigger again. So you could either parent the trigger box to the cube so it moves with it. You could set up a do once and have a reset, or you could, let's change that to 10 and have that just at the beginning there, so as your character walks over it, so they're only triggering it once. Makes sense? So now, what we should see is when we get back, it should stop. There we go, and then if we walk off it again, it'll trigger. But what if we want it to loop permanently? So what we can do is, instead of having a play, come off the return value and have looping. Now by default, the number of loops is -1, because that indicates that it's going to be an infinite loop. Hit play. Now essentially, that trigger box that we've set up now just starts the sequence, and effectively now we've told it that it's infinite. It shouldn't play an effect of anything now, because this will just permanently now forever rock back and forwards, and if you needed to, oh, there we go, we got the token, oh, but we fell off and we fell into the lava. So that is your sort of triggers, and you can mess around with this as much as you want, and play around with these. So obviously you want looping, which you can loop a number of times. You can set up these trigger boxes. You can also set up other types of trigger. So you could set up instead of a trigger box like this, you could set up where in a blueprint. Oh, I've just hotkeyed and added that to the track. You could set it up so when somebody presses a button, this activates this. So then you've got to find a key to activate the button, and then when you press the button, then the platform moves so you can escape the map. The choices for that are endless in a sense. So what if instead of that, what we need to do is we need to go stand on a platform over here, or we need to stand on a platform hidden behind here to activate this, so then we can jump and grab that, just so it's not as easy. So let's say if we let's get a trigger value, let's drop that to the floor, and we move that over here to the yep, okay. And let's say this is 60 by 60 again. Move that there. Right, so but obviously that's invisible, so we're not going to be able to see that. So let's just create a basic shape. Cube. Let's drag that over. Let's drag that here. Like this. Yep. Let's change the size of this to 0.1. Oh, another quick tip actually. If you press the end key on a static mesh with a collider, so let's say you want to get this flat on the floor, if you press end, it'll find the closest surface below it and sit on it. That might be something you didn't know. So yeah, what we've got now is obviously our cube, and now it looks like we've got a platform for you to stand on. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make that collider, that box trigger, sorry, just a little bit smaller, because it's now actually bigger than our platform. Is 50 the right size? Yeah, let's go 50-50 and then 5 maybe. Yeah, there we go. So that's perfect now. It's just outside the platform. So I mean, we know it's there. So let's just run over here. You know. Oh look, there's a platform. Okay, why did that just trigger? Why is that there? Hang on, what's just happened? Okay, this, I'll be honest, this has actually slightly confused me. Why has my trigger volume decided to teleport? Why did that decide to... Okay, that was unusual. I'm going to just double check that. I don't know if I've just found a bug there. Okay, that was really strange. I don't know why that trigger volume just decided to go back over there. But okay, that's surprising. Anyway, so we know this platform's here. We're going to come and stand on that, and then we run back, and oh, there we go. Now the platform's great. But we didn't know that button's there. Wouldn't it be great if when we stand on this platform and it's not activated, let's say we run over here because we think, oh right, well, nothing's happening. Well, what do I do? It'd be great if when we stand here, a little cinematic plays to show us there's a button here, and then we can run down and go and grab it. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it? Right, so let's make that cinematic. Cinematics are done in a very similar way, actually. So what we actually need is a new sequence. So we're going to go to animation, and we're going to do another level sequence. So you want to go to your content browser, right click, animation, level sequence, or again you can go to cinematic at the top and add a level sequence. And for this one we're going to be move camera. And then we're just going to double click that, and now the sequencer should be open with the move camera. Okay. So, first to move the camera, we need a camera. So what we can do now is create cinematic, and where will the camera be? So, for anybody watching using Unreal 5, if you go to the Place Actors panel, you'll notice that you get the same menu that you're probably very familiar with. And people following in Unreal 4, you'll be able to follow along a little bit easier now because it's very similar. So I'm just going to search for camera. Now I just want a general camera. I'm just going to drag that into the scene. I prefer to use just a general camera than the cinema camera. This is purely because I find the field of view and like sort of some of the other settings a bit easier to play with. And personally, honestly, I've just had more experience with them. Okay, so our character is going to be here when he's stood on the platform, and then we want to kind of be like, yeah, let's fly over here, and look, there's a button there, and then go back. Whoa. Okay, my navigation with the keyboard is not the best, but yeah, so essentially we want to be like here and around, here's the button, and then back. Now, obviously, for us to move this like this and rotate it, it's not nice enough. So what you can do is you can right click on your camera and you can actually pilot the camera. Now essentially, you're flying the camera around the scene. Now that makes it so much easier to control. So, we want the camera to be sort of like this. And then what we can do, up at the top left, you'll see this little like eject button, which is the stop piloting button. Click that, and you'll see we're now back in the scene view, and there's our camera in the exact place that we left it. Brilliant. Now what we can do, with the camera selected, let's go to add or plus track, actor to sequencer, sorry, and add camera actor. Now what we've got is we've got two things. Because this is a camera, we need to set up what's called a cut. Now, obviously, our character has a camera, the player character camera, which follows our character around so that we can see. Now, at some point, what we're going to want to do is stop using that camera to view through and watch the footage from our cinema camera, and that's what we use the cut for. So essentially, the cut is basically at the start of this sequence, start using the cinematic camera, or the sequencer camera, until the end of my sequence, and then cut off it. Now, you can adjust this sequence if you want. So something happens to the camera before you pan to it, if you've got a need for that, but we don't in this instance, so we're just going to leave it to cut from the very beginning and then stop at the very end. So that's just to explain what this panel does, but we're not that interested in this for now. We want to be at sort of time 0, and we want to change the position. So because we're happy with where it's starting, we're going to select the transform keyframe and add new keyframe, similar to how we did with the cube before. And then now, at some point in time, how long that takes, I don't know, we would like to be somewhere else in the scene. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to right click on the camera again and pilot it, and then I'm going to put the camera in a place that I want it to be at the end of the sequence, which is exactly here. So I'm going to stop piloting that, and then I'm going to press plus again, and then now you should see there's a nice line of where the camera is going to go from and to. And if you can see in the little preview here that we get a nice smooth transition between the two, and that is perfect. Because what it does, because of the rotation and stuff like that, because there's a transition between one state to another state, Unreal just naturally finds the smoothest way to get from one to another. If you're not entirely happy with the way that it's done that, or if you would like some stages in between, obviously you can intervene and put like halfway through, I want it actually to go over here and then snap there, and then you can see now you get this interesting curve. Yep. Sweet. And I tell you what, I completely winged that, but I actually like it, so we'll keep it. Brilliant. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to move it to 75, so it's yeah, so it's a bit more midway. But essentially, actually, what you could do, you could move that over here and get it to be like really slowly move over and then straight in. But I'm gonna leave that to 75, so it's a smooth transition between the two. I like it. Actually, I'm gonna change it to 90. I've changed my mind. Yeah, I like that quick snap to the end. I can never decide, you know. That's the best thing about this. You can play around with it and work it to perfection. Right, so again, now what we've got is we've got this scene. But there's no way to play this cinematic. We need to trigger it. So I need another trigger box. Again, I'm just going to click here so it's around this area, and I'm just going to do a box trigger. I'm going to then drag this here, have that bit above. I'm not going to mess around with it too much actually. I'm going to leave it where it is. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not too fussed about it. And right, so with our trigger box 2, I'm just going to rename this actually. I'm going to do camera trigger, and I urge you to do this with all of your things. Obviously, I've just slapped them in as cube and trigger box and camera 1 and stuff like that. I urge you to rename your stuff to something that's very practical and actually resembles what it's used for. Because As you get further and further into your game, the reason that's important is you might have hundreds of assets, and if you've got cube 1, 2, 3, 500, for example, you're not going to know which one's which, so I suggest you rename them, because it's better doing it right there and then than have to go back later and rename everything one by one. I've been there, I've done that, learned from my mistakes. Another little tip for you there. Right, so we've got a trigger volume, and again what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the level blueprint. If you did close that, again to get to it, blueprints up at the top, and open level blueprints, and if you are in Unreal 4, it should be around the center at the top. The icon just looks a little bit different, but it should still say blueprints. And when we're in here, obviously we can see that there is a sequence player for the platform moving. We want to select this trigger box, camera trigger. I'll misspell that, but it'll do. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add an event for trigger box 1. I don't know why it isn't giving it its proper name, but anyway. Add actor on begin overlap. Oh, see, it has the trigger volume. Anyway. Drag this in, and again, I'm going to set up something very similar, so I'm just going to select this and select this with whilst holding control, so I get both of them. I'm going to press control and W, which is duplicate, and I'm just going to wire these up to the other actor, and I'm just going to try and neaten that up. So now again, this can only be triggered by my character. Yeah, so what we want to do is we want to create a level sequence player, and we want to select the move camera level sequence, and then from the return value we just want to play again. Oh, not play 2, that's the wrong one, sorry. Just a single play. Now what this is going to do is when we overlap the volume, it's going to play the sequence. Now every time we stand on it, every time we stand on this trigger volume, it's going to play over and over and over again. So one thing we can do is do once. Just chuck that in there. Another thing we can do is obviously destroy the sort of camera actor, so the camera trigger. So, I'm pretty certain that the actor object reference there is actually itself, so we could do that. Yeah, let's try that. Let's try that. I'm not actually 100% certain on this one because I don't often use the overlap tactor. Let's read what it says. No, it doesn't say anything, which is annoying. Calls when another actor is over it, blah blah blah. Generates over it, blah, blah, blah. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to chuck it pretty straight. I just thought this might actually cause another bug. Let's go over here, just jump on here, boom, our cinematic plays. There's our thingy, and then if I walk away and walk back, there you go, it doesn't play ever again now. The only downside I think to this is, which obviously for not thinking about it, is this on active begin overlap. I don't know if this will delete with it. Yeah, of course it will, because there's no such thing as a camera trigger. Yeah, so that should be fine. So it plays once, that's great. But I don't know if you noticed that you could actually still move around whilst the cinematic is playing. So what you can do is we can cast to player third person character. As the third person character, is it disable movement? And then afterwards we can enable movement. Is there an enable movement? Okay, that's actually that's broken me out. Okay, let's not use that. Let's get player control. So, when this plays, let's disable the actors. You can leave this on data. Reroute notes and double click on a line and keep your review times. However you like. So we're going to disable the input of the character. We're going to distort the trigger. Now, when should we re-enable it? So how long is this timeline? So that's 150 frames, which, as we discussed before, we can set that to show us time. If you're not sure how to calculate it, that's 5 seconds. Another way to do it is find your frame number. So we've got 150 frames, we're running at 30 frames per second, 5 seconds. So if we do, from the point that it starts playing, and we disable it, we delay for 5 seconds, and then when that's finished, re-enable that, put that on the controller, and the target is this actor. Compile that. Now, in theory, you should have. There you go. I cannot move now. There's no way for me to move the character around, and then now I can move around again. Yep. I don't know why, but I genuinely thought that the character movement controller had a disable and an enable. So now we run over, hit the button. Platform, and hooray! There we go. We grab the chip. Now, obviously, that's just a widget, and there's no code behind that to say disappear or anything like that. But in essence, that should be everything now. So there we go. You've created some automated actions. You've set up trigger boxes, you've set up looping, you've learned how to set up the transforms within the timeline. I've discussed the camera cutting with the cinematics. We've set up a cinematic, that's so cool. oyster now. Go ahead and make a full cinematic sequence with fully automation, doors opening when you approach them, and all sorts of stuff. This was mainly done off the cuff. A lot of the things weren't planned out, which you could probably tell. It's also a bit of a long one, this one, so I appreciate if you've stuck through and watched it all the way. I appreciate likes and feedback. If you did enjoy watching, or if you found something useful, please consider subscribing, because I'll try to continue to post content regularly. Thanks for watching. If you've made it all the way through, super appreciate that, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.